on top of a tall hill where the wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the morning sunlight slid gently across the stone walls, there stood a castle that looked as if it had come straight out of a storybook. Its tall windows opened toward gardens filled with pink roses and silver fountains. In this castle lived a kind king with his 12 daughters, 12 princesses who, like the notes of a melody, were perfectly in harmony with one another and yet beautifully unique. The older sisters were calmer and more graceful, while the younger ones were more playful and full of energy. But one thing was shared among all of them: a deep love for dancing. Whenever music filled the grand hall of the castle, it felt as though even the walls began to breathe. Skirts twirled through the air, laughter echoed beneath the high ceilings, and the sound of shoes tapping on the marble floor created a living rhythm. The youngest of them, Genevieve, danced more than anyone else. For her, dancing was not just movement, it was the language of her heart. However, despite his kindness, the king was worried about the future. He feared that his daughters were growing up too free and carefree and were not learning proper royal manners. For this reason, he invited a strict noblewoman named Duchess Rowena to the castle to bring order and discipline. Rowena arrived in a black carriage. Her gaze was cold and precise, like someone who had come to correct something. Not even a full day had passed before new rules were announced. Running in the corridors was forbidden, laughing loudly was forbidden, playing in the gardens was forbidden, and worst of all, dancing was forbidden. The ballroom was locked. The piano was covered with a thick cloth. The castle slowly grew quiet. The sound of laughter faded, and the princesses felt as if something essential had been taken from them. At night, when a heavy silence settled over the castle, Genevieve could not sleep. She felt as if she could still hear the music in her mind. One night, she quietly got out of bed, woke her sisters, lit a candle, and said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." She led them to their late mother's old room, a room that had remained closed for years. Dust covered the furniture, and the candlelight made shadows dance along the walls. Genevieve searched beneath the old bed and found a book with a velvet cover and golden flowers engraved on it. When they opened the book, they saw a strange poem and an illustration of glowing flowers. Curious, they examined the floor and noticed that one of the tiles was loose. They lifted it aside, and a spiral staircase appeared descending into darkness. With hearts beating fast, they went down. Suddenly, the darkness turned into light. They arrived in a magical garden. Above them was a bright, starry sky. The trees had leaves that glowed softly, and in the center of the garden stood a crystal palace that reflected the light like a diamond. Gentle music flowed through the air as if it were rising from the earth itself. The sisters put on their shoes and began to dance, a free dance, a dance that had been trapped inside their hearts for so long. They danced until they were tired, laughing and feeling alive again. But in the morning, when they returned to the castle, their shoes were completely worn out. The same thing happened the next night, and the night after that. The king noticed. He was surprised. He became worried. Rowena pretended to be concerned, but in her heart she was plotting. She wanted complete control of the castle, and the princess's joy was an obstacle to her. The king announced that anyone who could discover the secret of the worn shoes would receive a great reward. Meanwhile, a kind and intelligent young man named Derek arrived at the castle. He was a simple shoemaker who had previously made shoes for the princesses. Genevieve trusted him. Derek realized that this situation was not ordinary. One night, he quietly followed them. He saw the hidden path. He went down, and when he saw the magical garden, his breath was taken away. But they were not
danger is
alone.
near. What is it?
Rowena
No
had
time, we
followed
must
them
go
as
now.
well.
Okay.
She used the magical flowers of the garden to
vines!
block the
I'll
exit.
protect you.
She intended to
They're too
trap the
strong.
princesses
Keep
there
fighting.
forever so she could take power in the castle. In the garden, there were flowers with special powers. One could create an invisible bridge. One could open a closed path. One could push back darkness. Genevieve bravely stepped forward. With the help of her sisters and Derek's guidance, they used the flowers. They crossed invisible bridges, opened blocked passages, and finally stopped Rowena's
Come on,
plan.
everyone, let's
They
go.
managed to
We're coming,
escape
Anna.
the garden.
Welcome, my
Rowena was
dears.
exposed.
Wow.
The king learned the truth. He
We
realized
understand,
that the
dear.
very
Thank you. I
thing
was
he
so
had tried to
lost.
take
We're here
away
for
from
you.
his daughters
that now.
was the same thing that gave them life. The ballroom was opened again. The cloth was removed from the piano. Music once again filled the castle. And that night, the 12 princesses, wearing new shoes and carrying 3 hearts, danced in the bright hall of the castle. Not in secret, not in fear, but with pride and joy.